Hello students, my name is Ms. Priya Lanka and today we are going to study Business Studies Class 12, Chapter number 5, Organizing. Organizing is that function of management which translates the plans into action. Now, so far we have seen the first step in the functions of management was planning, wherein you identified a blueprint or the course of actions that would be happening in any organization. Now, in this stage, that is when we talk about organizing, what we are trying to do is we are now trying to mobilize the various resources and we are trying to identify how much resources would probably be required in order to facilitate the tasks that have to be performed. So this chapter is going to now define all those plans that have been made, how they are going to be translated into action. This is actually the first step where the action part of the functions of management starts. Let us quickly look at the meaning of organizing. It is the process which coordinates human efforts, assembles resources and integrates both into a unified whole to be utilized for achieving specified objectives. That means once you have identified the blueprint, that means this is going to be step 1, step 2, step 3 and various other tasks that are being performed, that have been defined in planning. Now you have to identify for each specific task what all are the resources that will be required, and along with the human resource, that means the human element or the employee who is going to perform the task and what kind of qualifications or innate qualities that employee has to possess will now be identified, and based on that finally we have to analyze how the achievement of the objectives is going to happen. It is a process that initiates implementation of plans by clarifying jobs and working relationships and effectively using resources for attainment of identified and desired results. Now we keep on saying the attainment of organizational objectives, which is very important, but that is probably the end result what each and every organization is seeking. Now what organizing basically does is to identify all those people or clarifying how the task is going to be performed, who is going to be performed. When I say who, it has to actually, even the minutest of details are now identified as to each and every task, the person who is going to perform, what are those qualities that person should possess, be it in terms of physical qualities or behavioral qualities or intelligence qualities. All these things are now identified, and also the number of people. It may so happen that in one particular task, the similar kind of task will require more than one person. So in that case, even the number of people who will be required to perform those tasks is now identified, and of course now you will define a proper structure where each and every employee who so has been identified will be properly placed so that everything can run smoothly. Because now the reason being that any kind of material resources can be easily molded and modified as per the requirement, but it is not easy to mold and modify or transform the human behavior. That is why organizing basically concentrates more, or rather it will give a little more edge to the understanding of the human behavior and identifying the best person to work and develop a kind of a structure wherein each person is provided with a task which will further facilitate in the achievement of goals and objectives. Let us now look at the steps in the process of organizing. First, we begin with identification and division of work. Now this identification and division of work has to happen as per the predetermined plans. Like I said, obviously keeping in mind if planning had happened just before this, then whatever the plans that were created, now here you have to identify what kind of work has to be done, as well as divide the work. Now divide the work because like I said, there could be a task, but it is not possible for one person to perform the task. Maybe there are more number of people to perform the task, or maybe there are certain tasks that could be clubbed together and a person can be performing that. So this kind of division of work has to happen. Now again, if you can see, work is divided into manageable activities to avoid duplication and share the burden. Duplication has to be avoided because if there is one particular step which is repeated, it is not mandatory that you have different people performing the same task. So instead of that, you can club all those similar activities together and then continue to identify the various or put them in a particular order, so that you know that if anything is being repeated, you can remove it and you can have a set of or course of action which will lead the organization towards the achievement of the objectives. The second step is departmentalization. Now, departmentalization is nothing but all the activities which are of similar nature, they are clubbed together and they form a department. Now, what basically happens is if a person who is performing those tasks repeatedly, then there is something known as specialization. I think you would all understand. You can always take the example, probably the first time you had to cook something. Now, the first time you had to cook something, even though you had the recipe, maybe the outcome was not as good as you had presumed it to be. But if you keep on doing the same task again and again, then automatically the outcome will definitely become better. So this leads to specialization. That means if you perform a task repeatedly, then you start specializing in that particular task. Also, the departments that are so created, they have to be made using various criteria. It is not that only the similar activities are grouped together. Departments are because there are certain activities which are common to all the departments. So it does not mean all common activities can be taken apart. A department has to be made after properly scrutinizing the activities that are being performed, and those that can be put together will be put together under one particular head or one particular department. The third step is assignment of duties. Now, you have identified the departments. Now, based on these departments, individuals are put in as the in charge of these departments. That means first and foremost, you have to now start building a team that will start taking up the functions that belong to a particular department. So here assignment of duties will happen, and the jobs so allocated are according to the skills and competencies of the person. Now you need to understand that for a particular task, if there is a task, there are certain basic or innate skills that is required and certain competency that a person should possess in order to perform the task. Let me tell you, for example, let us say there is a diamond cutter. Now, a diamond cutter, he has to perform his task with a lot of specificity, and he should really be able to do it to the best of his capacity. That means his physical skills have to be really good. He does not have to put so much of a thought process, or he does not have to use his ideas, but at the end of the day, his physical capacity to perform should be very good. That means his skills should be very good. At the same time, if I talk about the manager at a senior level post, let us say he is handling marketing. Now, he does not require physical skills the way a diamond cutter would require. Now, he would require something that will give him, the capacity to make sound judgment. He should have the power to take decisions. He should have the quality, his behavior should be positive in nature. So, all these qualities are required at that particular post. So, this is where you have to identify the kind of competencies that the person who is to perform the task should possess. The next thing is establishing reporting relationships, because we already talked about, when we talked about the natures and the principles of management, there is something known as a scalar chain. Every superior has a subordinate, every subordinate has to have a superior, so that the task can go, or the movement of task can flow very smoothly. So this function has to happen. Now what basically here happens is the person who has to perform a particular task, he should know from whom he has to take the orders and to whom he is accountable. So this creates some kind of a hierarchical structure and further helps in coordination, or here at this stage what we can say is the scalar chain is actually established. So you know what all hierarchies exist, and at the same time you should be aware of all the hierarchies that exist in all the with respect to all the departments. So this has to be done at this step. Let us now see the importance of organizing, or why this particular function of management has created such a huge impact on every organization, and why it has to be dealt with very specifically when we are trying to understand business studies. First and foremost, you have the benefits of specialization. When, like I already had discussed, when specific workers perform specified jobs on a regular basis, it enhances the productivity. If you keep on performing the same task again and again, then somewhere lesser time is consumed, and whatever the resources are being used in the process are being used judiciously. So this leads to overall enhancement of the productivity. Repetitive performance increases experience also. That means now you know. Now what basically happens at this stage is, if you are performing a task, maybe there are certain areas or certain unforeseen circumstances that you may have to face. And at that particular time, if you have the capacity to take a sound judgment, so you are actually able to enhance your performance level. That means at that particular any unforeseen circumstance, with your kind of qualities that you possess, you are able to come up with a solution. So when you come up with a solution on a regular basis, that means you're actually gaining experience, and thus you can say that you are specializing in that particular area of performance or the task that we talk about. The second thing is the clarity in working relationships. Now, working relationships, or whether we call it the hierarchical structure, or whether we call it the scalar chain, or we call it the superior subordinate relationship. Now, this kind of working relationship is very important. Again, not only that has to happen in a vertical line, but also laterally. It is very important, all these working relationships, because it will somewhere give a clarification as to the communication or the formal process of information that has to happen in an organization. And also it removes ambiguity in transferring instructions and information. If I know that who is going to be my subordinate, or if the subordinate knows who his or her superior is going to be, then it is easier to pass on the information to the correct person. Now, why this is a very important step? Because obviously you do not want to lose it through the time. You do not want to waste your time trying to seek the right person who has to perform the task. By establishing the reporting relationships and you giving a clarity of the working relations, you know that who has to do which particular task. This again creates a hierarchical order, and fixation of responsibility is easy, and also specifies the extent of the authority. Fixation of responsibility is very important, because if the task has to be performed, there has to be one person who has to be associated with that overall performance. Now, who is going to take the responsibility? This step will clarify. Organizing as such will clarify. At the same time, who has the authority to give instructions with respect to a particular task will also be done at this step of organizing. Third is the optimum utilization of resources. Now, be it your material resources, financial resources, or the human resources, these will be properly utilized. They will be properly mobilized and utilized in this step of organizing, because now you know that who are the people who have to perform the task, what all they require to perform the task in the best possible way. So there is no wastage that will happen. There is no duplication of work, which will further lessen the confusion and further will reduce any kind of wastages that may happen with respect to the resources or the efforts. Adaptation to change will happen because organization structure, once it has been identified for each and every organization, then it can be modified and revised. That means the interrelationships that exist at the managerial level can be revised, and it can be modified in order to ensure smooth functions, or in order to ensure that all the tasks are happening. Now, there can be addition, there can modification in what sense? There can be addition probably of an extra personnel in between, or there can be deletion if you think that one personnel is not required in that chain of events that is happening. So all these things or modification can happen with when organization structure is properly defined. Also, with proper organizational structure, even though there might be any changes that are happening in the environment, the enterprise itself will be adaptive to those changes and will be stable. So that means irrespective of what your business environment is going to be, irrespective of the kind of changes that are happening externally, if you are having a stable organizational structure, you know that the entire organization can be stable. Effective administration also happens because there is clarity in working relationships, which will lead to proper execution of work. Because you already know who is going to be responsible for which task, you know who the subordinate has to report to, you know who is the superior, you know the entire scalar chain, the hierarchy levels have been properly defined and everything. So when each and everything has been properly defined on paper, and you are associating people with these definition. Now, when I say when you are defining a personnel, now let us say there is one particular department, let us talk about the marketing department. Now, at this step of organizing, you just define the number of people you require in that particular team. That means, there has to be a senior manager, there has to be a junior manager, and then probably somebody who will take care of, the ads, the sales promotion, and all those things. So you have to just identify the posts and then you further will start associating people with it. That is in the next step. Expansion and growth will also happen, because when you have on paper the entire organizational structure, then what basically happens is it allows the enterprise to deviate from the existing norms, and it will allow them to take up new challenges, which will further lead to growth and diversification. Like I said, when you're enabling yourself to modify, and when you're enabling yourself to revise interrelationships, that means whatever existing norms are there, you are allowing yourself to deviate from that, and you are deviating from that in order to become more successful. Obviously, nobody would want to perform a task to hinder the performance. They would obviously change or modify anything, the structure or anything that exists in an organization, to enhance the performance. So this is where expansion and growth will also be facilitated. Development of personnel will also be there when you're talking about organizing as a function, because once you have identified the structure, you identify the people, that means you are actually defining the superior subordinate relationship. Now, if the superior subordinate relationship is clear, there is a lot of clarity in that particular relationship, so you know that delegation will happen toward the best level. What is delegation, we are going to discuss later on, but the development of the new methods to perform a task will be allowed. That means if there is a superior, he totally trusts his subordinate to the extent that he has to, and he allows him to take certain decisions in his own purview, then obviously you're allowing him to be more creative, and you're allowing him to manage at his own level. So this kind of a situation will enhance the creativity and overall development of the personnel. Now just imagine if each and every superior is allowing the subordinate to grow or try to perform to the best of his capacity, or gives the liberty to perform to the best of the capacity, keeping in mind the organizational objectives, then at each and every level growth will definitely happen. Let us now look at the organization structure. Now this is nothing but the framework within which managerial and operating tasks are performed in any organization. That means all the tasks that are being performed wherein the relationships are clearly defined with respect to the people, the work and the resources will become the organizational structure. Now also it allows correlation and coordination among human, physical and financial resources. Now if you look at a organizational structure, basically it will give you a very predefined kind of levels or the set of levels that exist within an organization. Now these levels could be either vertically aligned or laterally aligned. Like we had already discussed that when we are talking about various departments that are being set up in an organization, then obviously the number of people who are going to work and what their association is going to be, to what level they can interact and communicate, all this will be defined in an organizational structure. Again, now what basically happens is, once this organizational structure is defined, you will know at what level which person is associated. Now this helps in understanding the reporting relationships, yes of course, and also to what extent the communication is going to happen, and the channels of communication is clearly defined once this organization structure is predefined. All the aspects of the organizational structure is shown in the form of an organization chart. I think many of you would have always seen, when you're talking about the levels at the top, you will see one CEO. Under that CEO you will probably have 4 different heads. Under those 4 different heads you will have maybe a team of people who are working. Now when you are actually specifying this entire thing on paper, that becomes the organization chart. Another important aspect of organizing is the span of management, which refers to the number of subordinates that can be effectively managed by a superior. Now, when we were talking about the various tasks that needs to be performed in an organization, we already discussed that there are certain tasks maybe which exists in an organization wherein more than one person is required to do them in order for that particular task or the job to be complete. Like one particular work can be broken down into smaller things, and each one can be associated. Now when you are having a team of people, now in that team, which is the best possible number or the number of people associated in that team which can be effectively managed. When we use the term effectively, means it should lead to maximum productivity. it should not so happen that there are a team of, let us say, 20 people, and the manager is not able to cope up, he is not able to manage these members of the team, and there is miscommunication that is happening, and that will obviously lead to further chaos. So the span of management also has to be clearly defined when we are talking about organizing. That means the number of subordinates who can be effectively managed by the superior. This also determines the levels of management in the structure. Now let us say there is a top level management. Now underneath that top level management, to what extent the number of people who can come in the middle level, who can be effectively managed by the top level. So this is somewhere defining the hierarchies that will be set up in that particular organization. We said that the most important aspect of organizing as such is to create the organizational structure. Now, as you can see, organizational structure is to identify the levels in the hierarchy or the reporting relationship, superior subordinate relationships, howsoever you want to define the people or the employer-employee relationship that is established in any organization. Organizational structure is broadly classified into two different types. One is the functional structure and the other is the divisional structure. Now, functional structure is when you are grouping all the similar kind of activities that are being performed under various functions. Now, the major functions are then subsequently converted into departments, and all these departments report to a coordinated head. Now, these departments may further be divided into sections. Now, like I said, when you are specializing in a particular task, that means you know that there are a set of people who are going to keep on performing those tasks only. Now, all these things, all these tasks which are similar in nature, they are further grouped together in departments. That is what we had discussed. Now, these departments are then put under one particular head to identify the reporting authority or the reporting relationship, or to establish the hierarchical chain, and subsequently they would be carrying on further through the hierarchical levels of the organization. Also, within the department there could be various sections. That is also there, because each section will then super specify in the task that they are performing under the specialized kind of a nature. Divisional structure is when the organizational structure comprises of separate business units or divisions. Now, each unit or each division is in its own a functional unit. That means it's separated, it is autonomous in nature. That means the unit has a divisional manager who has the authority over the unit and is responsible for its performance. The manpower are grouped on the basis of products that are manufactured. Now, each division is multifunctional. That means whatever functions that have been discussed previously, all these functions are performed in the division or under the same unit itself. Each division is self-contained and they work as themselves as a profit center. Now, this is very important because that means you have the autonomous of functions to be performed in your particular area of work profile that is required. Now, there might be many companies. Now, here I want to give an example. Maybe there are many companies which are having a variety of product line, or maybe they have grouped their entire performances or the job, if you see, into geographical locations. That means it could be in various zones depending upon the area. Now, if I just talk about India as a country, now India as a country is pretty large. So, if there is one particular unit which works as the main registered office of the central authority, now maybe there are different areas or units which are performing in various zones. It could be a north zone, it could be east, west, central zone. So, all these zones which are allowed to perform individually. That means each division, whatever the tasks are being performed, it is not influenced by the other divisions. So, this kind of a divisional structure also exists when we are talking about the organizational structure. Let us now quickly look at the advantages and disadvantages of a functional structure that exists in an organization. The advantages basically are that it leads to occupational specialization, like we had discussed. Once you are having a functional structure, basically means the entire organization has been divided into various tasks and those similar tasks are then converted into different departments, further which you have all or departments each performing a set of functions. So and that is why it leads to specialization. It promotes control and coordination within the department, because the set of activities which are being performed within the particular department are coordinated or similar in nature because of the similarity, and because the structure is such that the chart or the reporting relationships have been clearly defined and established. So and delegation of work is everything becomes easy, so obviously it leads to easier control and coordination. Increases managerial and operational efficiency, which further leads to increase in profit. This is basically because operational efficiency basically means the way in which you are able to perform your daily tasks will become more specialized as and when the time progresses, because of a repetitive nature of the entire functional structure. And also the managerial efficiency will increase because the team has been separated based on the functions, so it is more coordinated, or what we can say is more concentrated effort as far as the managerial aspect is concerned. It leads to economies of scale and reduces cost. Because of specialization, there is lesser wastage of resources. Lesser wastage of resources further means economies of scale, which basically means with lesser input you have a more output or enhancement of the productivity. All these terms mean economies of the scale have increased, and further it will reduce the cost, because wastage is less, that means the cost will definitely be lesser. Training of employees becomes easy because of specialization or the nature of the work that is being performed within a particular department. As they are demarcated based on the similarity of the nature of the jobs, the departments have been grouped together with a similar kind of the functions that they are performing. So training of these people becomes very easy because they have to be trained only with respect to that task. So obviously it becomes easy. For example, if there is a financial department which has to take care of all the financial aspects of a company, so a person who is walking into the particular team or who is being employed has to be trained only with respect to that financial aspect. So this becomes easy and obviously will be more efficient. Ensures different functions are given due attention, because you have identified that the departments, whichever department you choose, they have been identified by the organization and they have been given a separate entity within the organization. That means obviously they have been given importance also. So due importance, if I look at let us say a marketing division and the financial division or the administration unit, so all these are specified kind of tasks that are performed with very specific kind of needs and necessities. So they are being given due importance by the entire organization. But at the same time, there also exist certain disadvantages as far as functional structure is concerned. Firstly, there is less emphasis on overall enterprise objectives. Pursuing departmental interests over organizational interests may hinder interaction between the departments. Now, we have seen in a functional structure, all the members are differentiated based on the kind of tasks that they are performing. It may so happen that that particular department may feel some kind of superiority as far as the importance is concerned in the organization, because maybe they feel that their presence is imperative in the well-being of the organization or in the achievement of the objectives. So this may lead to each and every department working towards achievement their departmental goals, such that the overall objective somewhere may get lost. So this is one disadvantage. May lead to problems in coordination when information has to pass between the departments, very obvious in nature. Now when we are talking about the functional structure, we have seen that the organization as a whole will become successful or will be able to achieve its goals only when each and every functional unit is performing its tasks in tandem. So what basically happens is, whenever there is a lateral way in which the communication has to happen, that may get a little stressed out when we are talking about the functional structure. And it may or may not pass as per the necessity of the organization. Interdepartmental conflicts can arise in the absence of clear separation of responsibility. Like I said, when each and every department would feel their superiority as far as the achievement of goals and objectives are concerned, then there are times, there may be chances where these departments may feel that they are more important, and that is why conflicts may arise and may lead to inflexibility, and same skills and knowledge develop, which leads to functional heads do not get training for the top management positions. Now, when we are talking about the top management positions, now let us just talk about the board of directors. Now, when we are talking about board of directors, you cannot say that the board of directors where each member will take care of only one particular task. When you're talking about the top level management, their foremost function is the overall growth of the organization. That means they have to think about the entire organization holistically. They have to think about all the functions that is being performed within the organization. They cannot say that they will be focusing on only one particular function, because one particular function will definitely not give that kind of results, will definitely not give any results for that matter. So this is what happens if you are having a functional structure. A person who is handling a team or a department or a departmental head will constantly be performing the task that is being represented by their department. So what happens is it becomes very unilateral kind of a focus for that particular head, and he or she might not be the best choice when it comes to top management positions. The suitability of a functional structure is generally there when you have large organizations which have diversified activities and there is high degree of specialization that is required. That means you have a clear-cut area or a set of people who have to perform the task, be it marketing, be it sales, or be it finances or administration. So when you have such kind of diverse activities, and when these activities have to be necessarily grouped together based on the similarity and thus into the departments, then functional structure is the best suitable option. Let us now understand the advantages and disadvantages of the divisional structure. Under the advantages, we can see that there are varied skills that develop in the divisional head as he gains experience in all functions related to the product. Because each and every division is in itself a autonomous kind of a unit where all functions have to be performed which are not dependent upon other divisions, then automatically the head will be able to give equal importance to all the functions. So that is why his overall managerial efficiency will enhance. Divisional heads are accountable for profits, which will further provide basis for the performance measurement and fixation of responsibility. Like I said, because each division is in itself a functional unit in itself, it's an overall unit and a profit unit in itself. So obviously their entire performance appraisal can be done, especially with respect to the heads, based on the overall performance of the division. That means with one unit you can assess how well the people or the team who are being part of that particular unit are performing. So it is very easy for that kind of analysis or assessment. Each division is an autonomous unit, promotes flexibility and initiative. Flexibility in terms of the kind of decisions that need to be taken, initiative with respect to any kind of creativity or ideas that can be generated in that particular unit. So all these can be allowed in the divisional structure. Facilitates expansion and growth, which leads to new division which can be easily added. Like I said, because they are autonomous in nature, because there is nothing which is dependent on them, so it is very easy to grow the number of divisions with respect to a company. So whenever a company chooses, or whenever an enterprises want to grow and expand, it can easily create another division or another functional unit in itself, a autonomous functional unit, or what we call as a division. So these are the advantages. At the same time, there are certain disadvantages that exist, conflicts with respect to allocation of funds and profit maximization at others' cost. Now this is something which very commonly occurs in a divisional structure. Now for example, now if there is a company, now the company as such is the overall head or the overall top level is the same. Now just because there are various divisions, either based on geographical location or based on the kind of product that is being produced, it does not change the overall outlook of the company as a whole. So there might be chances that maybe there is one division which is performing better than the other division. So then the problem of allocation of funds happens, because the distribution of funds at the end of the day comes from the top level only. Now they decide what kind of funds have to be we should go to which division. Also, there are certain times when maybe there are, let us say, 4 divisions which are there, A, B, C, D, and A is performing constantly, is performing well. Now there can be a chance wherein because C is not performing as well as it was supposed to, certain funds are being redirected. That means A is earning the profit and is contributing to the profit maximization of the company as such, whereas the company, instead of allocating funds back to A for enhancing the performance, it is redirecting it to C so that it can boost its performance. So this can lead to interdivisional conflicts. Increase in cost because of duplication of work. Obviously, if you have each separate division has to perform all the functions, that means the functions are being repeated. Now if I take let us say with respect to marketing, now if marketing, again going back to the same example, if there is A, B, C and D, there are 4 different divisions. That means there is a marketing unit for A also, for B also. All such functions are being repeated, which will, from you, if you see from the overall company's point of view, it is an expensive affair. And the manager who supervises all activities of his division may ignore organizational interests because, like I said, because it is because of its autonomous nature, they tend to look at their division as the whole organization itself. It can happen because talking about A, B, C, D. Now, if A is performing, it's an autonomous unit, it can make its own decisions and it can perform in the way it chooses to, then it will not wonder what is happening in B, C or D. But the performance of B, C or D will definitely affect the overall organization as such. So this kind of a little deviation from the overall outlook or from from the point of view of the organization may occur in a divisional structure. Let us look at the suitability of divisional structure. It is especially suitable where a variety of products are manufactured using different productive resources, because probably the manufacturing of one particular product has got no resemblance to the production of some other product which is being produced. So when you have different kind of requirements also, then you can have a divisional structure. An organization grows and needs to add more employees. So this is where, when the organization wants to keep on growing, like I said, maybe it wants to go seep into the geographical location, or it might want to keep with respect to the zones, then again it can have a divisional structure. You can see there are 2 pictures which is divisional market based structure. Now in this you are actually having divisions which are catering to the end customer who are different. So this is market based. That means your market is totally different. So obviously the requirement for them is also different. If you can see, there is a commercial division, there is a residential division, and there is a government division. That means the end user are variable in nature. So even to cater to them, you can have different divisions. And the next is a geographical structure where you have the north zone, you can have the south zone, east zone, west zone, and based on the geographical expansion of the organization. In an organization also exists formal and informal variations which enable smooth functioning of the enterprise, and which also lay down the job description and rules and procedures related to work. This is of course specifically related to the formal organization. Now when we talk about the formal organization, it is a structure that is designed by the management to accomplish a particular task with specified boundaries of authority and responsibility, and which can be both functional and divisional in nature. Now, like I said, now it has been set up by the organization to ease the chain of communication that exists in an organization. So this is why formal organization is established, because a lot of communication has to be done, because again, coming back to the point that any organization deals with human behavior and human resources. So when we are talking about these, then unless and until communication happens, and that too in proper channelized ways, then the task cannot be accomplished. And this is where the role of formal organization comes into play. Let us try to understand the features of formal organization. It specifies the relationships between the job positions and nature of their interrelationship. That means when you are setting up the hierarchy or the levels or the scalar chain, or whichever name you want to give for those people who are accessing various profiles, job profiles, then it is the formal organization which will build which will somewhere give a proper means and ways in which the communication has to happen, and it will establish the interrelationship between them. Formal organization also lays down the rules and procedures which are the means to achieve objectives as per the plans. Now basically, if you have to achieve the objectives, then whatever are the procedures, or for that matter any plan that has been established, has to be communicated thoroughly. And we have been seeing over the past few segments also that communication is a must, in the sense that unless and until a person is told, an individual who walks into an organization, unless and until he is told what he has to achieve, or what the organization is expecting out of him, or what the objectives of the organization are, then there is no possible way in which that person can perform his task to the best of the capacities. So the formal organization is actually the platform which will lay down the rules and the procedures. It coordinates, integrates and interlinks the efforts of different departments. Again, lateral communication is also very important if you have to see at a holistic level. Now, if the organization has to function, then vertical communication any which way is important, because the superior has to delegate all his the related work to the subordinate. But at the same time, even lateral communication, so that the organization moves as a complete unified body, and it is not individually. You cannot individually say, okay fine, the one particular department is excelling because there is a lot of ease of communication that is happening, whereas other department is not. At the end of the day, the organization will not achieve in the process. So to facilitate this kind of coordinated and interlinked effort of communication and information that has to be passed, formal organization comes into play. It is deliberately designed for the smooth functioning. Now, it has been designed at the time of preparation of the organization chart itself. So once we have designed the organization chart and we have defined the organizational structure at that particular time, even this formal organization is clearly established. And more emphasis is on work rather than interpersonal relationships. The idea of creating formal organization is to facilitate the work that has to be done. So that, because we already told, when we were discussing management at the beginning, we saw that the entire task, or the entire function of the management has to be broken down into simplified smaller tasks. So unless and until there is a coordinated effort, the whole task will not be nobody will be able to achieve that. So this is where formal organization comes into play, and the emphasis is, because it is deliberately designed, the idea is only to enhance the productivity and to increase the output level, and not to build any kind of interpersonal relationships. Of course, interpersonal relationships will happen by chance, but that is not the main purpose of developing a formal organization. Quickly, let us understand the advantages and disadvantages of formal organization. As far as the advantages are concerned, it is easy to fix responsibility, because you have associated and identified the person who is being responsible for the task. So obviously, in case you have any kind of responsibility that needs to be affixed, then you automatically go to that particular position and you can always extract the information that is so required. There is no ambiguity of roles or duties, because on paper you have already clearly defined what is the formal organization. You have already identified how many people are there in a particular team and who is going to be responsible for what. So obviously there is no ambiguity, and there is obviously no duplication. Unity of command is maintained. Now, if you remember the unity of command, which says that one person should be taking directions from one person. In the sense, there has to be a very specific superior subordinate relationship. So if I have to take command from my superior, then I should know who that superior is going to be, and it has to be very specific in nature, or let us say it has to be a very unique superior subordinate relationship for each and every task that has to be performed in an organization. This can be established through the formal organization. It leads to effective accomplishment of goals, because the idea of creating formal organization itself was so that the communication that is happening, or whatever the flow of the work that is happening, is not only coordinated and interlinked. It is not only established vertically but also laterally. So when you have that kind of a clear cut stepwise directions which has been set up or established, then automatically it will lead to the accomplishment of the goals. It brings stability to the organization because you know who is responsible for that. So just imagine, from a third person's point of view, you enter into an organization, you have a clear cut identified kind of a knowledge as to who is performing what task, who is responsible for which job to be performed. All the roles and everything has been defined. Whatever the plans and the policies and everything has been clearly informed to everybody. Everybody knows what he or she has to do in that organization and what is the job that is expected out of him. So when so much of clarity exists because of the formal organization, so automatically it will lead to somewhere stability in the organization, and there is no chaotic nature. It is stable and it is smooth functioning in nature. At the same time, there are certain disadvantages. Now, these disadvantages are not only with respect to human behavior, because no matter how much I try to formalize, it is very difficult to encompass the entire, the plethora of behavioral aspects of a human mind. Firstly, there is delays due to chain of command, because of the formal organization which has been established, everybody has to follow a particular chain of command, or whatever how we call it, the scalar chain. So what happens is, even though I know that there is an easier method to do it, but because there is a formal organization, I have to go through that particular route only. So that may lead to delays. There is no recognition of creative talent, as deviations are not allowed, because the established superior subordinate relationship is there and the subordinate has to perform under the jurisdiction of the superior. Then automatically what happens is, the creativity or the ability to enhance your potential is a little restricted when it comes to a formal organization. It is difficult to interpret human relation, like I said, because it is not, you cannot put a tap on how the human mind will function. It is very difficult. Even if we keep two people and keeping all the circumstances and the entire environment or everything similar, there is still a good amount of chances that those two human beings will behave in a separate manner. So that is why no amount of formalization can actually work as expected, because at the end of the day we are dealing with human minds. Apart from the formal organization, there exists an informal organization in every firm or every enterprise or every company. Now, these set of relationships are because out of your social need and necessity. We talk about working in an organization for almost 8 to 10 hours. That is practically, you are a majority of your lifespan you are actually spending in your profession. So when you have such a circumstance, it is not possible that you do not allow your own personal and emotional instincts to catch up. It is not possible to keep them under control. Somewhere it will come out to the open, and you will realize there is a need or necessity to connect with people. So this will lead to the development of informal organization. In this kind of organization, there are no rules, it is flexible, and there is no fixed line of communication. It is by choice. That means you go to an organization, there are certain things which will just click. You are an employee of the organization, it will just click. You want to go and reach out to some other team members on not only at a professional level but also at a personal level, and this does happen in each and every organization. So this, which is not fixed and with no proper rules and regulations, that leads to the development of groups because of the kind of somewhere a belongingness, and somewhere they have a similar kind of thinking that will lead to the development of the informal groups. Looking at the features of informal organization, these originate from formal organization as a result of personal interaction. Like I said, having spent so much time in an office together, then there are chances that you will start interacting with other human beings at a personal level, and thus you will start grouping yourself into an informal organization. The standards of behavior evolve from group norms. Now you can imagine that maybe you are, and especially with students, you can always say, even though you might belong to a particular section, there are a set of students with whom you are very comfortable with. And why you are comfortable with, there is absolutely no particular reason. It is just human behavior which probably, which attracts the other mind. A mind attracts the other mind. So this is what the logic is, and that is what happens in an organization also. And then slowly the like-minded people come together and they form a group, small group, and they somewhere will start developing some kind of standards of behavior as per the group. Now that could be totally dependent on the group members. Maybe they are still a little formal, maybe they are totally informal, maybe there's a group of people who will allow even the families to associate. So this kind of group norms are created by that group itself. Independent channels of communication without specified direction exist. That means anybody can interact within the same group. Any two people are allowed to interact with anybody of their choice. And this kind of organization actually emerges spontaneously. Like I said, there is no particular reason. It is not enforced. Nobody is saying that, okay, fine, this is going to be your superior, this is going to be, just as you can always define a superior subordinate relationship, but you cannot define who is going to be your friend. You cannot say that, okay, fine, you have to have friends like this only. It is just that it naturally evolves, and even informal organization evolves within the limits of course, I'm not saying that all those people who go beyond your professional organization are your informal organization. They are friends and relatives also. But those members within the professional grounds, that means those who are there in the organization working with you, but still somewhere there's some kind of informal kind of communication, they are the part of informal organization. There is no definite structure or form, and which will further make it a complex network of social relationships. Let us now understand the advantages and disadvantages of this kind of informal organization. Of course, as far as the advantages are concerned, you have a very fast or a very widespread kind of information spread that happens within the group. Whatever communication has to happen will be very fast and will be very widespread in nature. Fulfills the social needs that will further lead to increase in the job satisfaction. Now you can imagine if you had to go to a particular workplace and you know that you do not have anybody to interact, and throughout the day you have to maintain a kind of a professional decorum. Somewhere it will bring down the overall productivity of the person. So if the person knows that he can always interact, whatever the purpose may be, maybe there is something which he or she wants to share at a personal level, or even with related to the task which does not have to be under the scrutiny of the organization, then somewhere it will help him to fulfill the social needs or the desire to be associated in a group. So, and overall that will lead to job satisfaction. It is not always that job satisfaction can be associated with the remuneration and incentives. Somewhere even the feeling of belongingness will develop job satisfaction. It compensates for inadequacies of the formal organization. There are sometimes very important organization related info that can also be spoken to and spoken within each other in the group. So this also happens, and it is not necessary that just because there is an informal organization in a particular company, it does not mean that they are always talking about something unrelated to their profession. Even professional talks do happen, and sometimes even to that level which could not be fulfilled by the formal course of action. But at the same time, there are certain disadvantages, and one of the main problems of an informal organization or a group of people who are very closely associated with each other at a personal level is the spreading of rumors. Just imagine if all these group of people who have created their informal group, now they belong to different departments. Now maybe there is something that has happened in one department, and it, like we said, because information spreads very fast, so maybe it just went on from one to another or another to another, and in that way it led to utter chaos and disruption of activities. Maybe there are events that has happened in one particular department which has not been established, but because of the informal nature, it has led to grapevine and spread across to other departments as well. That can actually hinder the overall performance of the organization also. It may create resistance to managerial decisions, because if you have group unity, many a times you would have seen that there are a set of people. If there is a team and there is, let us say, 6-7 people, subordinates, who have to report to one particular superior, and they realize some kind of groupism is there, then they might even resist the managerial decisions. And especially this happens in teams wherein there is the majority of the people belong to the subordinate, and the superiors are of course lesser in number. So of course this kind of resistance also occurs. Pressurizes members to keep up to the group expectations. Many times it so happens, like I said, these informal organizations are not a part of your personal organizations. They are not your friends and families. They're actually a part of your professional group. And because we have established that even though they are in a group, there are certain group norms and group behavior that is expected. So somewhere it might create in pressurizing one or two people in that particular group. It might so happen, you would have heard cases wherein that, okay, fine, if I want to be a part of this group, then I have to behave in a certain way because that is what the group expects out of me. This kind of pressure with respect to peer pressure and all those things you have also come across. So you understand, so this kind of pressure exists, which may overall dampen the performance of the individual. The next important concept that we are going to discuss is delegation. Delegation is nothing but the downward transfer of authority from a superior to his subordinate, and it helps the manager to extend his area of operations. So far, we have talked about how the superior-subordinate relationship is established in an organization. At this point, we are going to see delegation, wherein the superior is now going to transfer his authority, or he is actually going to tell the subordinate what exactly needs to be done under his extended area of operations. Now, keeping in mind his own purview of operations, he has to let know the subordinate what needs to be done, how it is to be done, and all those aspects. This is delegation. It is very rightly said that delegation is the entrustment of responsibility and authority to another, and creation of accountability for performance. Now, this quote was given by Louis Allen. Now, very nicely he has talked about the elements of delegation, which we are going to study further. The three main elements of delegation, which are responsibility, authority, and accountability. Let us now understand the elements of delegation. Authority is the right of an individual to command his subordinates and take action within the scope of his position. Now, here there is a clear-cut defining of the roles that has to be performed, and here the superior is actually going to tell the subordinate, or he has the right to command his subordinate to perform the action what he deems fit under the scope of his position. Now, this authority arises from the scalar chain, like we have already seen. It is established from the superior-subordinate relationships. It refers to the right to take decisions as per the managerial position. Now, if I am at a higher hierarchical level, then I have the capacity to take certain decisions on behalf of my team. At the same time, I can also authorize my subordinate to take certain other decisions on behalf of the entire team. So now this kind of action that happens is termed as authority. The extent of authority, of course, is highest on the top. That means the person who has the right to take decisions for the entire team, now be it the team, be it the department, or whichever area of his or the scope of his job is, and it flows to the bottom. It also gives the manager the right to exact obedience. Now, exact obedience, when we say that, that means keeping in mind the entire task or the nature of the job that has to be performed. Authority means the superior has got the right to ensure that the subordinate is going to perform the task as is required. As is required is very important, because when we are talking about a superior-subordinate relationship, it is not bonded labor. It is just that as per the requirement of the company, as per the requirement of the organizational chart that has been established, you can exact the obedience. Authority is restricted by laws, rules, and regulations of the organization. Like I said, because there are certain implications of the level of work or the level or the way in which the communication has to happen. Now this is where authority is restricted and it has to come under the purview of the rules and regulations of the organization, as well as certain legal implications that each and every company has to look forward to. Responsibility is the obligation of the subordinate to properly perform the assigned duty. Now this is why exactly each and every employee goes and joins an organization. The reason is because he or she wants to perform a particular task. Now if he or she wants to perform a particular task, if today I join a company because I want to perform as per the organization the needs and requirements, then I should have the obedience or obligation to perform that assigned duty as per the requirement. It should be to the perfected amount that has been designed by the organization itself. It arises from the superior subordinate relationship, of course, because I have to take up the responsibility in order to ensure that the task is moving in the right direction. It again flows upwards. That means I am responsible for the task that has been assigned to me by my superior. Also, responsibility should come with proper proportionate authority. That means that if I am responsible to perform a certain task, then I should also have the ability to take decisions with respect to that particular task. Only then I will be responsible enough to take it. You cannot say that, okay, fine, you have to do this particular task, but if for every little decision you have to come to me. That cannot bring out full responsibility from the subordinate. So this also is a very important element of the delegation practice. Accountability is being answerable for the final outcome. It cannot be delegated and comes along with authority and responsibility and also flows upwards. That means once the task has been performed, whosoever is responsible for the overall performance of the task should be answerable for the outcome also, whether good, bad or ugly. He or she should be able to be or be in a position to be answerable for, or should have ample reasons as to justify whatever the outcome is. Of course, if the outcome is as per the standard, there is no justification. He would be given, he would be applauded and he would be praised. It would be a praiseworthy task. And in case if he falls short of the performance, then he should be answerable at the same time. So the task is associated to the overall behavior or the level of performance of the person who is doing it. Let us now look at the importance of delegation. First, effective management. Now the managers empower the employees to perform the task. That means they are giving them the right to perform the task in their purview, in their in their area of performance, that you can say, which will further allow the managers or the superior to concentrate on some other issues which may probably require their direct attention at that particular point of time. So it means that in a team, let us say there is a superior and a subordinate. If the subordinate is able to perform the task, he takes the responsibility as well as he is willing to be answerable for the outcome. And if the superior trusts the subordinate to that extent that he or she knows that the task is going to be definitely performed to the best of the capacity, then automatically he does not have to focus on that task anymore. He can probably put his attention to maybe something which is more important and which is more required at that point of time. Employee development, because employees get the opportunity to utilize their talent, which can develop skills to perform complex jobs, and also at the same time they can assume the responsibilities to improve the career prospects. If I as a superior have allowed my subordinate to take up certain challenges, to make proper decisions, to identify what are the requirements of the task and perform the task to the best of the capacity, then automatically they will probably bring out the best in themselves also. They will bring out their maximum talent, and also at the same time they will have developed this readiness to perform even complex jobs. It is, if I have to give some kind of an analogy, it is like if you are able to if a coach is able to put the student in a pool of in a swimming pool, then initially it might be tough, but as and when you allow the person to learn, to grow, then probably the swimmer will become more and more competent with a period of time, because he will keep on practicing and he will probably become more adept in the job. Motivation of employees, because delegation has got psychological benefits, because the superior's trust is there, and that is how he will show by giving him the authority, by giving and bringing out the responsibility in the subordinate. At the same time, the subordinate will show his commitment by performing the task to the best of the capacity. The responsibility which is being shared will build the self-esteem, which overall improves the confidence levels. Facilitation of growth, because ready workforce takes up lead positions, which will further lead to the training and development of and as well as creation of experienced employees, and further lead to the expansion of enterprise. If I am making the entire subordinate or the team that I am the control of, or if I am associating myself with a particular team and I am allowing them to grow and perform the task in the best possible way with their innate talents, then somewhere I am actually training and creating some kind of a platform for them to gain experience with respect to that particular task, which will further help once the company would want to expand their enterprise. It is the basis of management hierarchy, because the degree of and flow of authority will determine who is to report to whom. So it is a clear cut definition of the scalar chain that exists in the organization. And also the extent of delegation decides the power of the job position. That means if I am at a higher position, then automatically I will have the capacity to delegate more work to my subordinate. As in when you go down the scalar level, automatically the authority becomes lesser and lesser, and somewhere you will eventually have to perform the task yourself and not be able to delegate to somebody who is junior than you. So this kind of management hierarchy is established due to delegation. There is better coordination, because the elements of delegation define the powers, duties and answerability related to various positions, and thus which will give a clear-cut definition as to who is performing what. There is no overlapping of work, and if there is no overlapping of work, it becomes a coordinated kind of an effort. Another concept that exists in any organization is centralization and decentralization. Now, decentralization is the manner in which decision-making responsibilities are divided among the hierarchical levels, and it is the delegation of authority throughout the levels of organization. Now, if you see, delegation is only between the superior and the subordinate, whereas decentralization is between the levels of the management. Now, this is very interesting and very important for you to understand, and just have a look at an upcoming video which will help you identify the difference between delegation and decentralization. Centralization, however, is the retention of the decision-making authority at the higher levels. Now, there are cases when the top level management wants to keep the entire control under its purview. So, in those cases, we have more of centralization that is happening, wherein the decision making is generally taken by the top level management, and they just pass on their decisions to the different levels, and all the other levels have to blindly follow whatever has the orders that have been passed. So, this is more of centralization, where the control is there at the top level management or at a central point of the organization. Finally, we can say that an organization can never be completely centralized or decentralized. It is just that as and when an organization grows in size and complexity, it is more useful from the organization point of view to make certain decisions, give it away to the lower levels and further decentralize its decision making process, so that the overall functions can be running smoothly throughout the different levels of the organization. So that is where it can never be totally centralized or it can never be totally decentralized.